Welcome to the new Sim City, available on Windows ME. The population is contented, but alas, random chaos event has now been triggered as a giant thingamabob appears over their beloved city, and I'm afraid you are about to witness the phenomenon known as space rage. With one blast, the city is wiped out, and the report quickly comes in.
All organisms and man-made objects have been eradicated.
You do know that plants are organisms, don't you? Because for having no organisms, this place sure seems really green. So they are told to probe the continuum, and they determine that a negative target event has taken place. So, looks like they're going to have to try again, this time by wiping away the entire Zal species! Dun dun dun! So, Year of Hell, not to be confused with TNG Season 1. This grew out of Before and After, the one where Kes was hopping backwards in time thanks to the doctor who was trying to extend her life and instead accidentally wound up wiping away everyone she ever knew and loved. It happens. We learned that Voyager would encounter somebody called the Krenim during the Year of Hell. Brandon Braga liked the idea of it and the beat-up Voyager. In fact, he liked it so much he wanted to really explore that. Braga seemed more willing to explore the darker side of Voyager, so it's no surprise that this came from him. The idea of actually doing a full Year of Hell was quickly quashed in favor of a two-parter of Hell that would serve as the season-ending cliffhanger. Instead, Voyager's third season would end with Scorpion, a success both creatively and with the audience. But Year of Hell wasn't canned, it was just pushed back, which was probably a good thing. As mentioned before, cliffhanger episodes followed in the Michael Piller tradition of doing part one and then saying, screw it, who knows if I'm even going to be back. That worked for Best of Both Worlds, but has been rather disappointing with most of the others because the second part can't really deliver on the promises of the first, having to tie up all the loose ends, or in some cases, we'll just leave them dangling and hope people don't notice. Year of Hell likely would have wound up in the same vein, a season-ending climax and then a what do we do now opener. By being pushed into Season 4, both parts needed to be finished, and consequently they gelled better. After the credits, Janeway and Chakotay have a grand announcement. We have a new set! Astrometrics, a combination of Starfleet and Borg technology to create accurate star maps so they can plot a better course home. And naturally, such a thing calls for somebody to pointlessly babble.
By my estimates, this trajectory will eliminate 5 years from your journey.
Our journey. Nice work, Seven.
Yes, here it comes, your Talaxian proverb.
One might say we've seen the best of times and the worst of times. I'd now like to recount some of those times from my unique perspective.
What the hell? Have I fallen through a wormhole where Neelix knows when to shut his frickin' mouth and the doctor's the one giving the annoying speech? You managed to accidentally turn the doctor into the breakout character. Why do you people feel the need to add the characteristics that doomed your intended breakout character? It's like you were designing rockets that don't work because you have them pointed upside down. Somebody finally shows you a rocket that's actually working and you say, great, that's awesome. And you know what would make it even more awesome? Turning it upside down and drawing a pair of balls on it. 7 highlights an area they'll be passing through soon with information on the locals. The big green area is the Zal, those guys mentioned during the teaser. But 7 says they're non-confrontational, and we can assume that this is based on what she recalled from the Borg. For now, anyway. They're interrupted by an attack by the Krenim.
Good day, sir. Have we offended you in some way?
It is important to ask that if you're Janeway. It's hard to know how specifically you might have pissed off this particular group. Did I help the Borg assimilate your people? Did Vidian's Eye let escape murder your loved ones? Or should I just mark this one down under miscellaneous?
This region is in dispute. You have no business in Krenim space.
How would we be violating your space if it's in dispute? You dare... Nope, sorry, bored now. Tuvok, release my hounds. Hounds? How cliche. Tuvok, release my rape gorilla. We'll show ourselves out. So the Krenim skitter off, and the Zal arrive to provide their exposition. The Krenim possess temporal weapons that allow them to rise to power, but the Zal overthrew them, and now they just run around impotently shaking their fists at people. They come back to do so now, but they're interrupted because of a shockwave coming from the Zal homeworld. As it passes, the Zal ships and people all vanish, the Krenim ship transforms into a powerful warship, and Voyager's getting its ass kicked. Time has changed, you see, so now the Krenim are the dominant power here. And of course, that's why Voyager came this way. Because a large but peaceful race and a collection of violent thugs is basically the same thing. No reason why one would follow this course, but consider another one in a different timeline, right? No. All ahead full.
We've done nothing to provoke these attacks.
At least as far as you know. He demands surrender or the crew will be executed, but Janeway isn't trucking with that. Nobody executes her crew but her. They resist, but the torpedoes are capable of passing through their shields because they're in a state of temporal flux, don't you know? So the order is given to run away.
Put the ship on 24-hour tactical alert.
Tough call, considering that according to Riker, fighting...
It's a waste of effort to test our combat skills. It's a minor province in the makeup of a starship captain.
Yeah, you know what else is a minor province? Your wiener. Meanwhile, on the time ship, the lackey is happy to report to his boss that wiping out the Zal has been a complete success.
If I told you to count the stars in the cosmos, would the task ever be complete?
Sir?
Are you asking me to do that because it's macaroni night, sir?
Our attempts may be sufficient. They may be even relatively successful, but they will never be complete. Choose your words with more precision.
Oh god, you're spending eternity trapped with somebody who's anal retentive. Well, technically he's correct. 98% restoration of the Krenim Imperium to power is not complete. But when you're mucking with time, a lot of times, well, that's going to be like horseshoes and hand grenades, really. You know, when Professor Chrono von Temporus Maximus built that time death ray of his to assassinate Hitler, yeah, he missed a couple of times, accidentally killed FDR and Patton, but we hopped back in time, double-tapped Hitler, left a suicide note, and history marched on. No harm, no foul. But I guess that's not good enough for the boss, because one colony didn't come back, so they're going to have to try it all again, even though any further mucking about is going to likely make things worse and not better.
No, not until every colony, every individual, every blade of grass is restored.
You said yourself our task will never be complete.
Oh, he's got you there, hoisted by your own grandiose posturing. But he's still in charge, and as he notes, time has no meaning here, so they can continue on forever, never aging because that has to do with time, while continuing to breathe, move, etc., you know, because none of that has to do with time, because flesh bomb!
As long as we stay on this vessel, protected from space-time, we have all eternity to accomplish our mission.
Suddenly, by comparison, a year of hell doesn't sound so bad, does it? Oh, and those things on your forehead aren't going to heal if you don't stop picking at them. Meanwhile, Voyager's getting its ass kicked, still not able to shield itself from the Krenim torpedoes, and their own weapons are down. Not only that, but there's an overload building that they can't deal with, so the Doctor and half of Deck 5 need to evacuate. All of this has transformed Tom into some bizarre Dr. Strangelove character.
We've got to hit them, now! Got him!
Yes, annihilate! Kill! 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 But I'm afraid it's a short-lived victory as the Doctor and his group escape into a Jeffries tube, but there's no time to save these extras, so there's no choice. When an explosion powerful enough to tear out the hull goes off, you definitely are going to want a hatch as thick as a refrigerator door between you and it. So Chakotay goes to talk Janeway into coming up with a new strategy besides keep fighting them until we learn how to be immune to their weapons. Because you see, unlike the Borg, there's only one Voyager to try to learn to adapt. And also unlike the Borg, their ship is powered by dysfunction and the tears of ensigns. So a new strategy is clearly called for. Well, he recommends abandoning Voyager and splitting up the crew into shuttles and escape pods to rendezvous on the other side, on the grounds that being a whole bunch of ships that can be blown away with one shot is better than being a single target that can take several sustained hits first. Well, for some reason, Janeway does not embrace this fruit fly survival strategy, and even Chakotay admits he hates it, but as first officer, it's his duty to present silly ideas to make the captain look good, so mission accomplished. So, life goes on Voyager.
When are they going to get us out of here?
Try to relax. Let's get back to the game.
Oh, the bottle says you have to kiss 7 again, Torres. Do it! Do it! Harry and Torres are trapped in this turbo lift and are playing trivia because she's injured and needs a distraction, and anything else would require people who are actually normal to be in there. Included is a reference to First Contact when Torres cannot come up with the name of Cochrane's ship. Now, you all know I'm horrible with names. I'll usually just throw a placeholder into a script for names I don't remember. Things like guy who was killed by weeping angels, and hope that I'm not too hopped up on cold medicine to find out what his real name is later. But even I could tell you, it's the Phoenix. It's not that hard, Torres, especially when you have everything in your vibrator named after Cochrane. The guy is probably pretty famous. Probably famous enough for you to remember a few details about that famous mission. You know, this is like being an American and thinking Columbus hung out with 3 strippers named Nina, Pinta, and Maria, whose mother swore she was a saint.
Mm-hmm. I just hurts a little.
Harry, stop touching the woman with the injured spine, please. You know, this trivia contest might be trying to make you look smart, although putting a chimp next to Torres would probably give us the same impression of it. But your actions only reveal to us that at best you might have some book smarts. You're an idiot. Well, they were finally rescued, and Tom shows off his new transverse bulkheads that will help protect them, well, most of them, during a breach.
I was inspired by an ancient steamship, the Titanic.
For some reason, I was thinking of a doomed ship captained by someone who thoughtlessly steered the crew right into harm's way, causing a disaster so legendary, all would remember it for centuries to come. Don't know where the idea came from, really.
Let's just say I've made a few improvements.
I knew your fixation with history would come in handy someday. Good work.
Doctor to Lieutenant Paris.
Go ahead, Doc.
Report to the mess hall at once. More wounded are on the way.
Wow. Within 30 seconds, you have him use mastery of engineering, history, and then summon him to conduct field medicine. And none of these things is even his job. What other guys were in that prison? How was this like the prison of savants or something? All right. I was running your numbers again. I don't think this grand unified field theorem of yours works, Bubba. Bullshit, man. I ran those numbers 3 times in the yard yesterday. Would have done it a 4th, but one of the screws found my shiv. Well, I think he's referring to the inherent instability in several elements of the field when you factor in gravitation in both macroscopic and microscopic variations. There is no instability, and if you say that again, I'm going to cut you like I cut that nun. Oh, but how will you find us, Mr. The Universe has 10 spatial dimensions? For the last time, it's 7 dimensions in space and 3 dimensions in time, you prick! But alas, while Tom is skilled in treating internal injuries and healing a cracked vertebrae, he still struggles with what so many cons do, having too big a heart. The doctor has to point out that the only concern right now is helping those who might die. Then they can move on to those with less severe injuries. His brusqueness leads to confessing how he had to close the hatch before the crewman would have made it, even though he waited for the last possible second. But that's the way of Year of Hell. Actions have consequences, instead of just being done for drama and then forgotten about. A deck ruptures, and now it's off limits. The bridge is hit by weapons, and it's trashed. You're forced to watch helplessly as someone dies. You're affected by that. And next time, we're going to see another event, a choice one person makes, which will have numerous consequences. Previously on Voyager, there was mucking about with time, so continuing to discuss what happened is pointless. Back to the story. Seven discovers part of an unexploded Krenim torpedo and calls Tuvok down so they can look at it. It's unstable, but they can contain the explosion with shields. That may sound odd, considering that the torpedoes have been whooping Voyager's ass, but the destructiveness of the torpedo is really that it's passing through the shields to do its full damage. They're already behind the shield when they go off. So in this case, they're directing the shields at the explosion rather than against the torpedo that it normally is trying to stop. You see the difference? Anyway, this was from before and after when Kes had to scan the torpedo for the temporal variance so she'd stop hopping about. Only there's no Kes in this timeline, so Seven will have to do that. But unfortunately, the torpedo goes off, and being a weapon that is meant to destroy ships, having that go off a couple dozen feet away is obviously severe. So Tuvok is permanently injured. Wow. Imagine if the torpedo had actually collided with him. It just might have killed him. Janeway's log entry explains how things have gotten worse, with the replicator severely damaged and so many uninhabited decks that space is at a premium. But there is good news.
Happy birthday.
Happy what?
My father didn't believe in birthdays. He would just put my sister and I in a pit, and whoever crawled out first got a gift. But then he was a man of tradition. It's a replica of a watch from so-and-so. Naturally, Chakotay can't just give a gift without telling some long-winded story about it, so Janeway figures she'll just give it back to him to shut him up. Well, Tuvok's permanent injury is blindness, but that's not stopping him from shaving himself with a future straight razor. Somehow he manages to cut himself doing that. You could use one of those bladeless kind, like Geordi used Tuvok, so that you could avoid this kind of thing. Well, but I suppose saving power is essential. That's why the blind guy has the lights on. Overall, things are bad. So bad that...
Just about done rebuilding the internal security sensors, and we're ready to program the audio signal.
I bet right now Tuvok is wishing that instead of being stricken blind, he was stricken deaf.
Do you want it to say, intruder alert? Or should we try something a little more dramatic, like warning, intruder alert? Or, intruders among us, danger, danger.
This is definitely the kind of thing to pester the department head over. I can see why you were added to the security team, Neelix. Mr. Vulcan, I've found the Krenim borders and we're in the middle of a firefight. Should I tell them, drop your weapons? Or should I go with something like, put your hands up? Well, they wind up with another run-in with the Krenim, so Tuvok's put in charge of handling their defenses because he has tactile control systems. Look, no offense to the blind, really. But we've already established what a problem it is for security and tactical to be the same guy during a fight. But now he has to do all of that while touching the panels to get information and to touch the panels to issue commands. And the guy's only got 10 fingers. At the very least, couldn't you maybe have somebody stand there to keep him updated on what's going on? Even in places where the blind are allowed to hunt, it's expected that somebody is going to be with them to help them do that. Not many Jedi are running around during deer hunting season. Well, to help offset this fact, Seven has been working on their temporal shielding and has just finished in time for them to stop the attack with no damage. So Janeway tells them to piss off, of course.
You may have noticed we have a defense against your torpedoes now. I suggest you stand down.
No response.
Their mistake.
Because, precious, it's my birthday and he wants it. Meanwhile, the time ship is wound up over a new target and prepares to fire.
Ready. Fire.
I like that subtle little bit here. He knows he is gambling. Really, this is the greatest success they've ever had. He's putting that all on the table just to get one more colony. He knows it's a foolish risk, but he can't not take it. So it fires, and the shockwave hits Voyager, which is unaffected this time because of their new temporal shielding, but it reduces the Krenim warship to a tugboat. Now, on the one hand, it's bad because Voyager is still messed up, but on the other, it seems that this severe cock-up by the time ship is only because Voyager's shielding interfered in their calculations. In other words, if the shielding wasn't up, things would have stayed bad and, in fact, probably gotten worse. Of course, the time shift people are kind of pissed off about that, so they go looking for Voyager to figure out what the hell. Voyager gets astrometrics up and running and calls up their map of the region. Yep, nice big green blob for the Krenim. It's obviously why they thought they should fly through that. After the shockwave, things have changed, shown on the star map because it's a map, so anything that measures the physical positions of stars would also be aware of political boundaries, of course. But before they can figure out what exactly is going on, the baddies arrive and steal Chakotay and Tom. Anorex, the captain, contacts Janeway to get some answers, but in so doing, she figures out the truth.
You are responsible for the changes in the timeline.
Yeah, it's a time ship, dumbass. Anorex tries to erase Voyager, so they have to make a break for it, causing even further damage to Voyager. So Janeway makes the decision to go forward with Operation Fruit Fly and send the crew out in shuttles and escape pods.
I promised myself that I would never give this order, that I would never break up this family. But asking you to stay would be asking you to die.
And I don't ask, I demand. So off they go. I'm sure this will be a comfortable trip. I mean, I'll bet those things are at least the size of a gas station bathroom, and no doubt are perfectly well equipped to travel halfway across the galaxy. Godspeed, little pods. Godspeed. Robert Browning once wrote, "A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for?" Star Trek has a similar philosophy when it comes to their main characters, except instead of exceeding their grasp, it's to exceed their own parody. For instance, a parody Picard and his fear and hatred of children, it seems like a ridiculous bit of extremism. In evolution, if he'd been the one who'd been there, he'd have likely assumed that the nanites were in cahoots with his greatest enemy. You're small, they're small, you're natural allies. Now I want the truth, and I want it now. I want my mommy. You don't get your mommy. Ah! 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 Mr. Worf, make him talk.
Delighted, Captain.
And yet, if Riker stormed in on parody Picard, pissed off that because of Picard a little girl is now dead, Even he would have the decency to feel bad about it. Whereas,
I should have never made that agreement with you. I could have saved that child.
You were right not to try.
yes, while his parody might feel guilty over Riker letting a child die, real Picard learns of the dead girl and gives him an attaboy. Likewise, we will spend this episode frequently watching regular Janeway exceed parody Janeway. Yes, parody Janeway is crazy, but there is always a method in her madness, while regular Janeway feels madness by itself is just fine, thank you very much. What we discover throughout Part 2 is that this situation is driving Janeway to become just like Anorex. Obsessive, prone to bizarre anthropomorphism, making rash decisions that the crew sees are obvious mistakes. She has stared into the abyss as it has stared into her. And the abyss said, Jesus! Part 2 picks up with Voyager hiding in a nebula because they're so damaged they're too vulnerable to even travel without risking destruction. In fact, they can't even avoid having gas leak into the ship, it's so messed up. And Janeway refuses to follow the doctor's orders in handling this disaster so that she and Harry are both injured. Yeah, Harry's the other one injured, what a surprise. And to top it off, she refuses to be treated because, of course, the most important state for a captain to be in during a crisis is weak and compromised. Good. Perhaps the doctor can hit her with something, too. That might help. For one thing, it might just beat some sense into her.
There are 7 other crew members on board. You're the captain. Delegate.
Yeah, and as persistence of vision established, that's something Janeway really sucks at. Look, I think we're going to have to admit to ourselves this is going to not end well. I know it's hard. At my heart, I am an optimist, and that is not an easy thing when you know nothing good will ever happen to you. But the captain's taking of shortcuts to try to get Voyager patched up is not a sign that this ship is going to get its shit together properly. Meanwhile, Anorex has Chakotay and Tom cleaned up after a couple months of examination and brought into a working lunch so they can discuss Voyager.
When I first encountered your vessel, it was badly damaged, barely functioning. What if I told you that in the blink of an eye, I could restore Voyager to its former condition?
All we have to do is let the episode end and you'll be right as rain next week. Trust me, I know it doesn't make any sense, but it always works that way for you. He explains that everything they're eating here is from a civilization that's been erased from existence by his time ship.
Mr. Paris, you're devouring the last remnants of the Alceran Empire.
So, no chance for seconds, huh? He offers to work with them to alter history so that Voyager avoided meeting the Krenim, so it wouldn't be damaged and they wouldn't interfere in his restoring the Krenim. But Tom sees through it. He'd like to destroy Voyager and take the simple way out of all this. He's only offering this because Voyager's been hidden and he can't find it to destroy it. So, lucky thing they're hiding in that nebula, right? Sure is clever to hide and fully repair the ship before going out to risk destruction by so dangerous an adversary. And I'm sure Janeway will in no way do something monumentally stupid in the meantime. But anyway, Tom refuses to help destroy any more civilizations, while Chakotay's a bit more open. It's not as if this is the first time he's been asked to work for a captain open to letting entire civilizations be wiped out for the greater good, though he does say that if they help, it can't be by destroying any more. Which is a problem for Anorex because if he destroys 2 more civilizations, he gets a free extinct sandwich, but he thinks the 2 of them could probably work this out. At the other end of the cuisine spectrum is Neelix's latest beverage.
What is it exactly?
I call it the elixir of endurance.
It provides plus 40 hit points and 5% damage reduction. 7 sums up all of Neelix's cooking in as succinct a manner as anyone ever has.
It is offensive.
And if you are what you eat, I'm guessing Neelix has eaten a lot of his own cooking. Well, now's a good time to get down to business, since Janeway and the 7 other crew members the doctor mentioned... wait, 2, 3... I'm only seeing 6 others. Or does Janeway actually have a specially trained gorilla? So they have to report on their progress.
I'm happy to report that I've repaired the optronic error in my program.
Good, don't make me do that to you again. The ship is in bad shape, including not being able to warp, so Janeway decides there's only one conclusion. They have to leave this nebula despite not being space-worthy, because screw you, I'm in charge. You know, Captain, Picard hid in a nebula too once to repair the ship from the damage it sustained from a great enemy. He left it when it was clear the plan was no longer going to work. Because that's what sane people do. 7 points it out. The ship is defenseless, so leaving the first thing tomorrow is a mistake.
I appreciate your opinion, Seven, but I disagree.
A decision you have based on what exactly? The only justification you've offered is that you think you should be forming alliances with others, which, leaving aside how annoyed you previously have been with the suggestion of alliances, Do you really think you're going to be all that convincing in a ship that's limping through space looking like you played bumper cars with asteroids? You've done a lot of immensely stupid things, Captain, but this, wow. This is like you and common sense are involved in a very messy divorce. There's a door in your mind. We're all subjected to things we need to handle. Grief, loss, depression, stress, and oftentimes under circumstances when we don't have time to deal with them. So we put it behind the door for the moment to deal with what we need to so we can handle it later, face it, and be able to conquer it and move on. But sometimes it can come too fast so that it piles up more and more until eventually there's so much you can only let it out in smaller, more manageable bits over time to gradually deal with it. So you need to put a lock on the door to keep it from getting out, bashing against it, clawing at the woodwork. But you find something you can use to lock the door and handle the contents slowly over time. But if it comes faster and faster than you can cope with, you need a bigger lock and a bigger one, just until you can deal with what's inside, just until you have enough time to handle it all. But sometimes someone who doesn't understand that a seemingly mundane thing is actually a very big lock, they thoughtlessly smash it, and they allow all of that to lurch and slither and stomp through the door, and the only thing left now is madness. And someone has broken a very big lock. So that's why Janeway needs to make a decision on what to do while they're hiding in this nebula. A decision has to be made, and this is going to require some very careful thought. What to do, what to do?
Well, I think you should.
I have no room for that religious crap. Get that out of here. Good. Now, we can discuss this rationally. I'm willing to try anything once. Lace 'em on me. What would you do? Well, not me per se. I mean, I'm just an atom, but I can form a molecule with others. Boring. How do you deal with your enemies? Well, I don't have anything like that. The only thing I could really do is split and hope the energy release would destroy them all. Not too crazy about killing myself to kill my enemies, but hell, I'll keep my options open. Or what do you think?
What am I even doing here, and how the hell do I get out?
I like the cut of your jib. All right, well, what do you think?
You should eat Harry.
For the last time, I am not eating Harry. Not while he's still of use to me. All right, I'm going with the shoulder cowboy. We're leaving. Well, Tuvok tries correcting 7, but it's not exactly helping.
Remember this guideline. The captain is always right.
Even when you know her logic is flawed.
Perhaps.
And of course, that's what you have to do, because that's the way it works. For them to do otherwise would be against Starfleet, and that would be, that would be like Janeway refusing to be relieved of command when regulations order she should be. And we all know that would never happen, right? The rules are sacrosanct. That's why you have to obey Janeway, even when her orders are stupid or just plain mad. Meanwhile, on Babylon 5, that's the time ship. Chakotay thinks that they can prevent Voyager from entering Krenim space by erasing a comet that they had to avoid once. But a test shows that removing it would prevent, about 8,000 civilizations from ever coming into being. Whoops! There is, of course, one problem with the entire plan anyway that seems to be completely unaddressed. Even if this would have worked flawlessly, it wouldn't prevent Voyager from coming here because its temporal shielding protects it from changes in the timeline, remember? What's more, the shielding itself is affecting their calculations. That's why the Krenim ship turned into a tugboat. So even if they're right, they can still be wrong. So long as Janeway's running about listening to Shoulder Cowboy, this plan can't get off the ground. And even if you think they might try to get her to lower the shield by promising this will work, she won't even tolerate sitting still to fix the ship. How do you think she's going to react to lowering your defenses to fix the ship? Probably a mad speech about how the principles of the Federation say that those who are not silent shall be fed to the warp core shark. But Chakotay's mistake reminds Anarax of his own mistake. When he first used the time ship, he eliminated their greatest enemy, but it turns out that a crucial antibody was inherited from them. So as a result, a plague swept through and devastated the Krenim. So he's been trying to sort this out ever since. Amazing that he's torn up with regret over all that he had to do. Trying to rationalize away all of his guilt and often failing. While over on Voyager we have Janeway, Captain Janeway, I'm the best captain in history. Stranding all my people, their lives are filled with grief and misery. So let's see how it's actually playing out on Voyager, and, Janeway's decision is playing out exactly as reality says it should. In fact, probably even more optimistic. Voyager's being bombarded by micrometeors. They have something that would normally handle that, of course. It's the deflector, the thing that solves 80% of their technical problems, including, by the way, the temporal shielding. But it seems to not be working, And there's no emergency power because when Harry said he needed more time to fix it, you said, screw you. And there's no engines to fly out of the path because you were told that they were broken and you said, screw you. Well, guess what, Captain? We need to do something no matter how stupid. You're screwed. This is the kind of face-palming incompetence that gets you relieved of duty. So when she bravely charges into the flames of deflector control to get them back online, it's not heroic. It's, I hope you managed to learn something from all of this, you idiot. And with this, 1,000,000 cigarettes cry out with glee from the grave for this poetic justice. Just remember, Captain, with you getting in everyone else's way, this all falls on you.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
The Doctor treats her, but she'll be scarred for life from this experience, which describes most of my brushes with Voyager. Many people think my show is a desperate cry for attention. No, it's a desperate cry for help. The Doctor says she needs to stay here for observation, which she naturally refuses on the grounds of go to hell.
I'm not going to stand here while you rationalize yet another brush with death.
You don't have to.
As Chief Medical Officer, I have the authority to relieve you of your command.
You're not going to do that.
If, in my medical opinion, your judgment has been impaired, I can, and I will.
Try it, and I'll shut down your program.
The difference between the good guy and the bad guy this episode is the bad guy isn't making threats against his own crew.
I am sorry, Doctor. I've been operating on instinct for so long. I did not think before I spoke.
And what does this, and the fact that your face and arms have been jerkied, tell you? That your instincts are horribly, horribly wrong. If this is where your impulses are leading you, then guess what? You're not fit to lead right now. But of course, when the Doctor officially relieves her of command, she just ignores it. Well, thanks for proving nobody should do a damn thing you should say. If you won't follow the rules of command, why the hell should your crew?
Because before I give up command, you'll have to shoot me.
Oh, your terms are harsh, but acceptable. Meanwhile, on the time ship, the crew's morale has been suffering, though, as we see the lackey playing against Tom, who is, of course, winning because he's Tom Paris. The guy admits in a roundabout way how awful this eternal purgatory is. Tom soon tells Chakotay everything. The crew wants this all to just end, and they even tell him how he can do it. But Chakotay thinks working with Anorax for now is the way to go. Yeah, different ship, different mad captain, same old Chakotay. If this was the town ho from Moby Dick, Chakotay would be completely behind the whole pointlessly prolonging the mutiny just so we can flog them plan. Anorax shows this great faith is well placed when it's revealed that he's going to annihilate another species in the hopes of getting a 52% restoration. You sure can pick 'em, can't you, Chakotay? He confronts Anorax over the latest incursion, who on the one hand regards the loss of any species as insignificant, but on the other seems to show regret over what he's doing, having to destroy and recreate things over and over again. He reveals that his motivation is the loss of his wife and all the generations from them, his entire future, really. So, like Janeway, he's been rationalizing things. He's become obsessed and also somewhat mad.
When I tell you the time has moods, a disposition to be intuited, I'm not speaking metaphorically.
What do you mean?
Anger is one of its moods.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Anger and the desire for retribution, vengeance. Time itself has tried to punish me for my arrogance. It has kept me from my wife, denied me my future.
You nut job. Time is not conspiring to keep you from your wife. It's conspiring to keep me from getting my show up on time. Tom confronts Chakotay over this, but apparently I'm only doing this because an entire dimension is working to undermine me has been a convincing argument, because Chakotay has gone right back to the calculations. He makes excuses, but Tom finally slaps him down.
He's lost his family. Okay, that's a terrible thing, but so is everyone else on this ship. And frankly, so have we.
Wow, I don't think we've heard anything about loved ones back home in a long time. Now it's always been, hey, Let's go study that nebula. There's a slim to none chance it might be totally different from every other nebula ever encountered by anybody, and that's worth delaying our trip home. Chakotay finally comes around and greenlights Tom's plan, but it'll require telling Voyager about it so they can attack from the outside during it. So Janeway has somehow persuaded two species to align with her beat-up piece of crap that an immortal with a time-altering ship is their mortal enemy and they must fight him. Was it the fact that Voyager can't go anywhere without catching fire, or that the captain is one step removed from Dark Man that was the more convincing argument? The plan will involve reassigning everybody but Janeway to various ships, but she'll be piloting Voyager alone, because obviously the entire thing can be handled by just one person, especially when you have beaten it up so badly that it looks like a toy model a monkey tried to put together and then just gave up on. Nope, she's sticking with Voyager because it's like any other member of the crew and therefore cannot be left behind for the duration of the battle because that would be abandoning it. And while anthropomorphizing time is a sign of madness, anthropomorphizing a ship that tried to kill you and thinking it's your friend is perfectly sane. So they prepare to head into battle against the time ship.
Voyager to Mawasi vessel.
You mind not flying so close? I could open the window and hit your bottom with a broomstick if I wanted to. So the lackey helps Tom contact Voyager in anticipation of the fight, while Anorax dismisses all of this as nothing worth worrying over since they're protected from weapons as well as aging in their outside space-time state. But Chakotay says that if these ships are with Janeway, she'll likely give them temporal shields, which could be used by their homeworlds to protect themselves from the weapon. So Anorax has no choice but to fight them. It'll be pretty easy since, despite the fact that they have only one weapon and it's obvious where it's pointed, two ships are good enough to fly right in front of it just so they can be shot and erased from time. I can see now why Janeway was able to con them into joining her. These guys are idiots. The lackey refuses to continue the fight, though, and instead takes the core offline so they return to normal space. Although that now means that they can use their conventional weapons since they're in the same universe again, and proceed to kick 7 kinds of shit out of them. It's not helped that the guy flying right by Voyager smashes into it, as if we needed further proof that only morons would align with Janeway. Oh, hey, it looks kind of like I have the view screen back now. What now, shoulder cowboy?
I think you should crash into them and destroy them all.
I can't believe you actually thought I was going to fall for your trick.
What trick?
Come on, it's obvious.
Yes, I know, but...
That was Shoulder Adams' idea. You totally ripped him off, shoulder cowboy. I expected better from you. But since you both agree, I guess that the plan is really the only sane thing I could do.
Or you could eat them all.
I'm not eating anyone. All right, course set in. Everyone told to lower their temporal shielding. That will reset time for all of us. Now I just need a clever action hero line.
Time's up?
Yeah, that's crap if I've ever heard it.
I shall consume all of creation.
You shut up. All right, I'll say, crap.
Time's up.
So Voyager crashes into Babylon 5, the time ship, and all of its work is now undone. That means the Krenim is now 100% restored, so when they confront Voyager, they just tell them to chart a course around their space, completely different from before when the Krenim had 98% restoration, and thus were homicidal despotic lunatics. Things are actually better for Anorax. We see him with his wife, putting his calculations aside to be with her. Happy ending all around. Except those who were infuriated by the reset button, of course. Congratulations, everybody. That's 2 more episodes that you watched that never mattered. Post-episode follow-up. Stupid Neelix Moment is bugging Tuvok over the minutia of the intruder alert system. If he can't handle even something that trivial without pestering the department head, well, it's no wonder Janeway thinks she has to do absolutely everything if she doesn't want it screwed up. We have some kind of Lazarus of the Week for everybody who died and came back due to nothing having actually happened. There's a lot I want to say about the ending and the implication of it, so I will be revealing my final score for this episode in the accompanying video, Thoughts on Year of Hell. I'm so creative when it comes to names. Marvel Comics would sometimes put out a series called What If, told by a giant bald guy who lived on the moon and watches you while you're on the toilet. These were stories of Marvel events that went differently than the stories actually had in the comic books, like if Spider-Man hadn't been able to escape his black alien costume, or if the Punisher's family had lived, or if Bruce Banner was a violent genius and the Hulk an innocent child. Some were pretty good, but a common failing many writers had was they were now in a situation where all bets were off. They could do anything because there was no need to worry about the ramifications. You could have Wolverine murdered on page 4 in a throwaway panel, and it wouldn't matter. But the consequences of that was that the stories were weakened because it shoved it into your face that none of these things mattered. End of the book, it would all be shoved aside and almost certainly never matter again, with the odd exception. For instance, Spider-Girl actually was born from the pages of What If. But overall, a lot of times it felt like cheap drama for people to die or things to be blown up just because they could be. I'm sure it could be liberating to not have to worry about any kind of restrictions, but just because you can do something in fiction doesn't mean it's a good idea. That's the problem with Year of Hell. Had the idea of doing this over the course of a season as an overall subplot while the main action went on been played out, then the events would have been more spread out, the dramatic potential of the situation more fully felt. The ending is problematic. I can understand the argument that Voyager should have been continuing to be all screwed up after the episode ended. The lack of consequences for things ranges from the annoying to the downright frustrating. I mean, see Real Life for a good example of that with Voyager. But they had already done this what-if style all-in approach. Voyager was so devastated that it just wouldn't have been feasible to continue with it that way. They would have to sort it out. They needed to do something to fix Voyager and restore, at the very least, the main characters to an uninjured state. It doesn't necessarily have to be immediate, though. But that was part of Voyager's problem with refusing to have character arcs unless they were unimportant. What I liked about The Gift was because it made Scorpion all the more meaningful. There were consequences from that which needed to be addressed. I think one thing a writer can do is look at whether a potential problem can be turned into an opportunity to do something new. That's when you're really seizing your craft and handling it well, in my opinion. Let's look at what I think is a great example of this. TNG's family took the situation, the Enterprise is going to need weeks in dry dock in order to get repaired, and said, sure, we could do that all off-screen by skipping ahead a couple of months. But should we? Is there an opportunity that we can explore here? One criticism I have frequently been on the receiving end of is, this isn't how you do a review. I don't want to seem like I'm defending myself or boasting with this comment, but I just want to use this to illustrate the example of my thinking using this, which is, conformity is almost never a reason to do or not do something, nor is adherence to labels. If there is not a substantive reason not to do something, then the fact it's outside of a box someone might put it in is no excuse not to do it. In fact, it might be all the more compelling of a reason to escape the box. That's why my review of Family led to so much confusion, because I refused to score it on the grounds that it was too different to be a TNG episode, and that was perceived as an insult, when it was the exact opposite. Family was brave enough to say, F space, I'm doing a show about a guy in a vineyard who fights his bastard older brother, and I'm going to make it work. Now, you can't always do that, because if your show is outside the box too often, it ceases being related to that box and becomes something else which it is now positioned inside of. As Terry Jones said about Monty Python, one of the things we tried to do with the show was to try and do something that was so unpredictable that it had no shape and you could never say what the kind of humor was. And I think that the fact that Pythonesque is now a word in the Oxford English Dictionary shows the extent to which we failed. But breaking out of the box sometimes is a very healthy thing, and Year of Hell did have the potential to do that without the reset button. For instance, there is no reason that Voyager couldn't have been repaired by a friendly ally. Let's suppose that in return for the repairs, the Voyager crew would need to use their Starfleet experience in investigation to do some work for them. After all, Mortal Coil, Random Thoughts, episodes that were coming right after this, both could have been done as the main plot with the backdrop of Voyager in dry dock being repaired. You could show tension between Janeway and the leadership when some of their missions would become questionable to her. It could even lead up to an episode where there is such a schism that in the end the crew will have to retake Voyager by force and escape, their former ally now becoming a new recurring enemy for them. And that's just dealing with Voyager itself. What about healing Janeway's scars? Tuvok's blindness? Sure, that stuff has to be sorted. But in the meantime, explore it, and then resolve it. But they chose a more literal reset button in the time reset. Okay, that is an understandable thing to be annoyed with, given the show is notorious for reset buttons. Actually solving all your problems with one, especially in an episode that was supposed to be all about showing the dire consequences of their situation, is going to annoy many people and potentially undermine the episode. Yet, let's look at one of only 2 Trek episodes from this era to win a Hugo. All Good Things. And what does it end on? Reset button. Time has changed and none of this happened. But what's the key difference here? Just because it didn't happen doesn't mean that it's forgotten or that it doesn't matter. Picard remembers, he tells others, and they are changed as a result. There's a reset, but there's also a lesson learned, a sense that we are moving forward with this, so we accept it. Now here's a thought. The temporal shields all had to be dropped so that they would be reset when the time ship exploded along with everything else. Suppose, though, that it hadn't dropped all the way. Suppose deflector control, which is where all that stuff is being controlled from after all, was the last place where it went off. And too late. And one person was in there. One survivor of this horrible year of hell. Perhaps a character that you think is so useless to you, you were going to write him out of the show just a half season ago. Well, here's your chance now to reinvent him as something new and interesting. A scarred survivor of the war that never was. He doesn't need to necessarily be grim and gritty, but the point is that he can be changed into whatever you want him to be. You can make him something worth writing about again. Give this episode some lasting impact, to be the Picard of Year of Hell, and give the crew something to reflect upon, to both realize how vulnerable they truly are out here, and how grateful they should be for the overall good fortune and mutual support that they have. And there's achievement to paradoxically be found in the consequences of actions that they took but were wiped away by their own success. Like All Good Things, where humanity was saved because they stepped up and made the ultimate sacrifice. It may not have been actions they took, but here he can tell them, you would have, because I saw you do it. But that's not what Year of Hell gave us, and in that I can sense the disappointment. And I admit I feel it as well. But ultimately I've decided after much reflection to give this a score of 9 out of 10, because despite this, I feel it is one of the greats for this series, and I'm not willing to dock it further for fumbling the ball. Ultimately, the primary disappointment I have with it is that it could have been more, but that doesn't diminish what it already had.